Okay, with Baylee Sinner, Where the Rope Ends is the feature film played at the Documentary Film Festival. It's about this Nichole who basically gets into canyoneering. And before we get into the film, it's a fantastic film. Tell people what canyoneering is. What is that exactly for people who don't know?
Sure. Canyoneering is essentially reverse rock climbing. So you're hiking up and then you're rappelling down into a canyon. So a lot of the canyons in Washington where I live are wet canyons. So a lot of time people are wearing wetsuits or dry suits and you're jumping into pools and swimming and then kind of rappelling down a rock face. Or in other places like Utah, it's a lot of dry canyons.
So almost 25 years to the day, I did this in Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
In a place called Interlaken, Switzerland, and it was kind of like a very interesting. Well, it was kind of an amazing experience because like none of us really knew what we were doing, but they took us. They were kind of like they were cowboys in a lot of ways, where they just like they were like basically you have to jump 30 feet in the into this little area and make sure you jump into this little area because there's rocks and you're going to hurt yourself. And it was like I never heard of it until the day I did it. I signed up for it, and I thought it was kind of a really kind of an amazing experience. And I'm watching your film and I'm like, yeah, and I understand. It's the physical, it's the emotional, it's the spiritual. You're kind of getting everything you can as a human in this experience.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because you're seeing views that you would never see unless you are rappelling into a canyon. And so I've only done it once, but just to be on a rope and experiencing that is a really cool feeling. But as I'm sure you know, it's incredibly dangerous
Yes.
because a lot of time, you're utilizing anchors that people put in that you don't know. And so, you test it and make sure it's safe. And also I should say I'm definitely not an expert. So if canyoneers are listening to this, they're probably like rolling their eyes. But it is very dangerous. And there's actually one of the characters in the film a few years after she broke, I believe, both her legs in two separate canyoneering accidents, which is not uncommon. But the people that do it, they're also very safety oriented. The sport has improved a lot over the years. Like for example, how Nichole got in her accident, she was using a specific device that they actually don't use anymore, to my knowledge, in the canyoneering community.
Mhm. So yeah, I wouldn't like, I thought it was the craziest thing in hindsight. I remember like being home like a month later and going, I can't believe I did that. And I can't believe everybody was safe. It was just though, it was like in the way you described it, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's reverse mountain climbing, right? Like you're kind of like, you're heading towards the bottom, not going to the top, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So the excuse me, the rappel that they did in the film, I believe there's like eight separate rappels. So it's like you rappel down a rock face and then maybe you do a little bit of maneuvering around trees or swimming to get to the next anchor and then you rappel down another face. So what they did is it's called Wallace Falls in Washington, which is a gorgeous hike up in Index.
All right, so I'm going to reference your blog interview that you did with us for a second. So I just want to talk about the origin story of this film. So you met Nichole, who's your main character in the film. You met her on a yoga teaching training program, and you're a commercial. You're working in the advertising world, and you were kind of stressed out about it. And then you got into an accident, and you were in a wheelchair, and you're just looking to get, I guess, to connect with others and connect with your creative self, I guess.
Yeah, well, I should clarify. I definitely was not in an accident or in a wheelchair. That was
Oh, she
Nicole.
was in, sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize. She got
All
in an
good.
accident. She was in a wheelchair. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just kind of signed up for this yoga teacher training on a whim. You're right. Yeah, I was working, or I work in advertising, and was just kind of looking for a way to de-stress. I've always been into yoga. And going into the teacher training, I had got an email from the studio, Spirit Yoga Studio, that one of their students had gotten in an accident. And I read her story. She was promoting, there was a Kickstarter, or excuse me, a GoFundMe to raise money for some of her surgeries.
Mhm.
So I had read her story, was really inspired by it. There was a poem that she had written that I thought was really beautiful. And then I walk into the teacher training on day one. It's a 6-month program, and there she is in her wheelchair. And so it was pretty incredible to see someone that can't really move their body. She had a metal bar that was holding her pelvis together, actually doing yoga. So having her eyes closed and just kind of moving her arms and taking these deep breaths was just something that I'd never really witnessed before. And so I was kind of just observing her and really interested in her, throughout the teacher training. And then we got paired up for a project about 5 months in. And I went over to her house, and within like the first 10 minutes of our conversation, I was like, "Would you be interested in making a documentary film?" Um, and she wasn't at first, but she really wanted to give back to search and rescue. That's kind of been her number one goal.
Mhm.
And so that's how it started, is it was going to be a short film with really targeted towards search and rescue. And I just learned more and more about her story, and it became pretty clear that it deserves to be feature length, or there was, enough to tell there where it felt like it should be. And so it just kind of grew and grew.
And you didn't like know her as like as the audience is getting to know her. It seems like you're getting to know her as a documentarian filmmaker. Like it sort of has that kind of like that perspective where it's like you say you like it seems like you didn't know her that well, and you asked her this like to be in it's kind of an interesting story that you even asked her that question and she agreed.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a good point that you bring up. I think I was just very drawn to her. Just she's just, she's just one of those people where you're around her and you're like, you are very different. You are unique. And getting her in front of a camera, like I think she portrays that, just how she is in real life. And you're right, like I was learning more and more about her throughout the process, and this whole film took about 7 years. And every year we just got closer and closer and started working more together. It started out where, I would just I would meet with her and learn about the story. We'd do interviews, I'd go over to her house, whatever, and then I'd go off and put the story together. Um, but then towards the end, it's like she was in every editing session. She was coming over. We were having crazy note card brainstorming sessions, which was really a gift, but also made it super challenging, because now I was like, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much about your life and all these interesting story beats, and this could go here and this could go here. So then, just whittling it down, I think the editing process was one of the most challenging.
So then she's a producer on the film. She became a producer on the film. I know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we and having someone involved without filmmaking experience was actually a really cool a great teammate to have, just to get that outside perspective. And for her to be able to watch reviews and, just have a whole new sometimes my editor and I, it's like, you get sucked into certain things, and
Yeah.
so that perspective that's a few steps back was really great. But yeah, it's been incredible working with her.
You said it was 7 years because you like from the time you asked her, and then why? So, but why did you like why did you decide to feature? Because I'm assuming that the short film would have been less time and basically in less a daunting experience. Were you like that's pretty ambitious? Like I'm assuming you're doing other jobs, you're doing other work while you're doing this film at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I never imagined myself doing a feature, like just building that kind of a story arc and that length is was super intimidating to me. Especially working in ads, like I normally never do anything past 10 minutes. I mean, even 10 minutes is pretty long. Most of the time it's past 3 minutes. Um, so yeah, I did not imagine doing that, but I think just the story beats were there, and there were so many things I wanted to explore. Um, sorry, I'm losing my thought. Is this gonna be one fluid interview?
Yeah, it's
Oh no.
I can cut it out if you want, but basically, but okay, so let's talk about the structure of the film then.
Oh, Yes,
But
I do actually have something to add to that.
yeah,
Sorry, I blanked out for a second. But as we were exploring the short route or feature or whatever, it was also at the time when virtual reality was coming out and was really exciting. And so that was another avenue we explored of like, okay, well, what if you put someone in Nichole's perspective? So the audience was experiencing this near death end of life moment. So that was something else that I explored, but it really limited, how you could watch the film, how many people at a time. And
yeah.
of course, like that medium has changed a lot. So I'm glad we didn't go that route. But yeah, it really naturally evolved.
Okay, so let's talk about the structure of the film then, because basically there's a definitely some interesting aspects of the film for sure. So basically it's like you start the film out and they're like, let's talk about the animation first because it's a really nice touch to your film. When did you decide? And like it's not something you could just like do in a day. It's like this is I'm assuming this is a very long process to do the animation. So when did you decide that? Like how far were you into the structure of the story to like say, you know what, it needs this beautiful animation that I'm going to put in this film.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because that was decided very late. Um, we did some test screenings, not as many test screenings as I would have liked. I think like moving forward for other projects, I definitely want to do test screenings more and earlier. But the test screens that we did get, we got the feedback that people were really confused about the fall, how she fell, what happened, canyoneers and non-canyoneers. So, of course, we had to find the right balance of not getting too into the weeds of the canyoneering details, but needed to give enough clarity for people to understand what happened. Um, and we found that it was hard to do that with real footage. Like you almost needed a bit of a diagram to do that. But
Mm.
to just introduce that style once for that one moment, especially in a moment where the emotion is really building up, would have felt really weird. And so it was like, okay, animation is the move, but now we need to find more scenes to integrate that into. And so then, like, as we knew we had that one scene, and then just kind of exploring the rest of the storyline and figuring out, okay, what other scenes do we want to portray a certain emotion, but the footage that we have isn't doing it, or do we? So we kind of use it as a tool to either like push the emotion or be explanatory. Is that the right
But then you
word?
had to find an actual animator to do those scenes and like animate your story as well.
Yeah, so I was just looking up design examples on Behance and found an artist that I really liked. His name's Marco De Masi, and he's based out of Italy. And I reached out on a whim, not really thinking he would respond because it's a very low budget film. Um, and he did, and he was interested, and we hopped on a call, and he is an awesome guy, and he got his animation friends roped in as well. And it was pretty funny because they all barely spoke English. And so just getting on these calls and having these very creative, kind of abstract discussions was pretty funny. And there were some misunderstandings where, maybe they misinterpreted something, or I didn't explain it in the right way. So then we really started utilizing drawing out what we were thinking of and then having them translate it into like their own vision. So that was a really funny process. But also one of my favorite processes is just getting those designs and getting those animations back and being able to watch them was really exciting.
Just because from a storytelling standpoint, you really make this visual story. You like, with the stock, like with her home footage, you got some really interesting elements. Like you got this old video. I'm referencing the old video of like the how to like rappel. I guess like the guy's telling you how to rappel, and then instead of just people having and of course the beautiful footage you have of the actual kind of canyoning and the nature. So you have a lot of different elements in the film, right? Like you have the interviews, you have the nature, the actual canyoning itself and showing us, and you got the interview with her, then her home movies, and then you got the animation. So there's a lot of visual elements that are happening, and like just from a tone standpoint, they're all kind of different. They're very different, but they all kind of worked out. They all kind of they in editing, I guess. Were you worried about that from a tone standpoint that you had so many elements that you're trying to meld into one cohesive story?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Um, our editor, his name's Troy Gordon. He's very good. And he specifically, like, I've worked on a couple advertising projects where he's really good at mixing different styles. So the intention was, because we have a lot of source footage and footage from the day of the accident. And so the intention was to kind of blend those with the reenactment seamlessly, so the audience almost didn't know what was a reenactment and what was real.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think we quite pulled that off to the level that I was hoping, just because um, you can only use iPhone photos and like short iPhone videos so much. We didn't have quite enough source footage to fully pull it off. Um, but uh but yeah, I mean, it is a lot of different kinds of footage, which was really challenging for our colorists, as you can imagine. And we also utilized changing the aspect ratio to kind of like, for the more cinematic footage, we have that in oh my gosh, my mind is blanking, I'm sorry. In with gosh, please cut this out. What's it called? Where there's like more it's not, it wasn't, it's not 16:9, but it's like a more squished one.
16:9:19, and there's what's the other version? Yeah. So it's a different kind of like it's a different scoping of the element. Yeah. So
Yeah. So we played around with aspect ratio so that
yeah.
the cinematic footage felt different than the iPhone footage.
Gotcha. Of
And
course. Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So then yeah, that's so then but then you what about like did she come to you about like I have this all this home videos? Where did the home video aspect come into the film?
Yeah, she had a lot of home videos, so we had to go, and they were all VHSs. So she took them to, she's from Illinois, went to Illinois, picked up her tapes, took them to a place and got them digitized. And then we just searched through it and found the right moments of her and family. Because we do go into her backstory in the first act, which
Yeah.
was something that was tricky to juggle, because there were some really great stories with her upbringing that I tried to include, but it was hard, because they're great stories on their own, but it pulled the audience away from ultimately getting to the fall. And so that was another challenging part of trying to figure out which story beats to include when she gets in front of the camera. She tells things so well. But trying to say, like, all right, we just need the audience to fall in love with her. We need them to know that she cares about her daughter. We need them to know that she is searching and kind of feeling lost in herself and looking for something to make her feel whole. So what stories can we use to contribute to those beats without pulling away?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so you're basically you're roping us into this human being that we love and care for, and then so when the fall does happen, we are worried about her safety, to say the least, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because something we struggled with is I think just the way she speaks, and she's so, like, she gives off this aura of peace that I always want to make sure it didn't feel like she was this angelic figure that people can't relate to. Um and so we did need to show some of the, like, grittier moments of her past and her challenges, so that when the fall happens, you're rooting for her. You're not like, oh, it's this perfect woman that, one bad thing happens, because that's definitely, that's not true. With she's went through a lot of really real stuff.
So 7 years, that's like, so then were you ever worried that the film was not going to be completed, like was never going to finish?
No, I mean, I knew, like, there was no way in my mind that it wasn't going to be done. We did run into some pretty significant hurdles, mostly financial.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, like throughout those 7 years, we we had never been full time on the film. That's another thing that I would do moving forward, is because a lot of the people working on the film were just my friends in the industry, and they were volunteering their time. Um, but you can only have someone volunteer for so long, and you can also only like hold certain expectations when people are volunteering their time long term. So that was something that moving forward with different projects I would do differently, is have paid positions and have them be, set hours or full time if possible. And then of course COVID slowed things down. Nichole's a nurse, so she was very busy. Also throughout the process, she ended up having to get a second surgery and go through that recovery. So it wasn't consistent for seven. I mean, it was a full time, like I said, for 7 years, but we were chipping away constantly. But yeah, I don't know. There's something in me that I never felt like it wouldn't get done.
So then it's an individual story, but also there's like these macro kind of themes that you can kind of dive into. It's almost like if you wanted to, you could pull at different threads and kind of make different versions of the film where it's obviously it's a really about, being a trauma victim and basically like a lot of people who've gone through what Nichole has gone through kind of can shut down, physically and emotionally, and it's hard to like as you kind of, I think as you kind of alluded to in the film, where like you're kind of using this trauma and kind of like as a challenge to grow yourself as a human being, which is easy to say out loud, but it's a hard to do as a human being, right? And so then there's that, but then there's also the search and rescue kind of aspect of the team, because there's a whole movie about that, right? About these search and rescue people who are, yeah, I think you were kind of saying that there are a lot of them are volunteers, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that was another story beat that was very challenging, is because ultimately this film, it is a gift for search and rescue. We're doing a ton on the fundraising and awareness side for them. We have a big event coming up in April where we have over 30 chapters signed on to host screenings where they earn all the proceeds. Um, and and that was always the plan going into it. But the deeper we got into Nichole's story, that we found the harder it was to integrate search and rescue, because it just felt like a departure from Nichole.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were able to find, strategic ways to weave them into each act. But it definitely was a challenge during the editing process.
No, because
Um,
yeah, it's her story. You have to, I know, I understand. Like, it's like, I was just, but you have to keep it on her thread. But basically, you can see that there's another movie here, right? That you can make, because
yeah.
it's like, it's something, it's things that people don't know about. It's kind of fascinating in a way, like what takes a person to even be on this team? Like, what kind of human being does this in a lot of ways? Because it's dangerous for one, and there's also you have to be in incredible shape, and three, you don't really get paid. So like, what's the motivation, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they put in so many hours. Like
Yeah.
Paul, the one character we have in our film right now, he's going on his like 42nd year of volunteering. And it's a lot of time that they are putting into this. And they're especially the search and rescue team that we feature. I mean, a lot of search and rescue teams are like this, but they're highly, highly trained, very, very good at their jobs.
And then there's also that theme of the mother-daughter story, right? Where I think you got a pretty really amazed, like a nice little montage about the two of them, and she's hiking, and they look alike. They look very they look like mother. Obviously, they are mother and daughter, but she got her mom's genes from a physical standpoint very much, I guess, very much so, right? Because they're almost like twins in a way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know that's a really beautiful element of the story that I think a lot of people can relate to, whether you have kids or not. And I especially love our ending line. I don't want to, I'm doing some spoilers, but she's speaking to her daughter, but everything she's speaking to her daughter, it's really she's speaking to the audience, and it's a
Yeah.
message the audience can take away. Um, and
But
cut point. There's a
at the
cut
same
point for you.
time, you
Sorry.
there it kind of showed me like that it's a way to get to be motivated to get over your what like your physical, like she has a daughter, she wants to be a good mother, right? Like there's an extra motivation to get healthy, like physically and emotionally, and basically because she wants to be the best mother she can be. So she has to get over fight her fears and go over and fight through this situation that she's in, right? Because it's not just about her, it's about her daughter as well. So
Yeah, definitely. She has all of these different factors that are pushing her to get
yeah,
better. The daughter, which is, yeah, definitely more like meaningful, real reason. And then there's also so many external factors like her job and her, her friends and getting back to regular life and doing yoga. So she has all of these external things weighing on her to get back to her everyday life, but yet physically and mentally, she isn't quite ready for that, which we show that journey in the third act of that balance of, pushing too far, pushing too much, taking steps back, and then trying
yeah.
to rebalance.
No, it happens a lot too, right? We've like just training in general, where you kind of like you want to get into better shape or whatever, and you always and then you push yourself too far, and then you get hurt or you're exhausted, and then you take two steps back. So
Mhm.
it's like the body can only take so much, right?
Mhm. And the mind.
In the mind. No, no, it's interesting because it's like you want to. It's like we there's a certain personality I think I can relate to it where like you try to push so much and try to do a lot, but then it's to your disadvantage, right? Because eventually you're going to crash and you're going to burn out and then you're going to go backwards, right? So
Yeah, and that was something that Nichole really helped me with throughout this process is because, in the, in the film industry, you've got a shoot date or delivery date or whatever, it's like you're hitting that date and
mhm,
you're working crazy hours, whatever, to hit that date. So that's just kind of what I'm used to. But she would really say, like, if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling inspired, if you're not feeling creative, there's no need to force this. Like, we don't have a due date. And so really being able to like take a step back and for me to think like, okay, am I like mentally in the right space to dive into this specific task, or am I just pushing to meet my own internal deadlines?
yeah. Well, sometimes deadlines are good, right? Because then
Yeah.
like you're forced to do something, and then sometimes if you don't have a deadline, it's bad because then you kind of procrastinate, I guess, right? So it's that balance, right? I guess I'm assuming, or like,
Yeah, and also figuring out how you work, because some people are great and work really well with deadlines and some people do not. And so that was another thing throughout this whole process, is figuring out like how because this was such a huge project with so many different elements, and so just figuring out like how I lead and
mhm.
how I work on something that's so arbitrary. So just different like project management, a lot of project management learning lessons.
So let's talk about the your interviews, because it really you're really only using one core interview of her, right? So which I'm assuming.
Well, that was actually about 7 interviews of her.
Oh,
We
was
just
it? But it's the same. She's wearing the same outfit and she's in the same. It's the same. But I guess you interviewed her at different times. I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And so we did, let's see, I believe we did 2 interviews with her in the same outfit, the same room. One of them, her hair is a completely different color, which is pretty funny. She walked in on the day of and I was like, oh no, shoot. So we tweaked it a little bit in color. Um, and then, there was several other setups where we just utilized the VO. We actually did do an interview with her in that same studio setting that everybody else's interviews are done in, with the projector
Yeah.
behind. Um, but and she'll say this herself too, but it's interesting because her tone and the way she speaks is completely different in that interview. She actually was just coming from doing a presentation about her fall. She was doing some mindfulness presentations. And so she was just coming from that and was in like a very, studio like environment. And so her tone is completely different than the other interviews where it was just me and her, or me and a few other people.
And then you interviewed a bunch of other people, which is, yeah, they're all like, it's, I like, how many do you remember how many interviews you did in total? It seems like probably at least a dozen.
Including Nicole's many interviews, we probably, yeah, I think you're right, about a dozen is right, with, and in total, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 or 6 locations.
Mhm.
Which again, moving forward, I think it was hard having I had such close access to Nichole that it was like, "Okay, let's go pick up that line. Okay, let's go,
Gotcha.
let's go do this new story beat." That I think that elongated the process, where I think it would be interesting to just say, "All right, we only have one interview date and we gotta put a film together with this." That I think that would be an interesting challenge.
I like the one establishing moment in the film. I think his name is Chris. It's a Chris Moriarty, and you
Mhm.
start with the bunny. He's got a pet bunny, but it's not in a cage. It's just like it's like running like a dog around the house.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was a shot that like I had always wanted. Like I always imagined that moment. And Nichole and Troy, our editor, were like did not get it. They were both like, this just seems so weird. And there were times where I was like, is this too weird? But every time we play it in the theater, like it seems to land with people. So it made
Because
it in.
you don't see that. You're like, what? Why does he have a like? It just leads to questions like, like, doesn't it just poop around the house? Like it's like I don't understand. Like he's got does a potty trained like.
There's actually two bunnies too. Fun fact.
So okay, so, it's just bizarre. You know what I mean? So it's something you don't see very often. So then okay, so then yeah, like you said, daunting film, and it's like yeah, just a really well paced, well edited film, and it's total. I know it's like this huge, it's this huge project that you made. Like you said, you kind of it's like a part time project. And then so when did you know it was done? Like it's like when was that feeling where you're like, okay, I think we got it.
Um, and it's funny you ask that because I've heard so many filmmakers be like, you even when it's done, there's still things you want to fix.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's probably only two or three just little things I would fix, but overall, like I do feel really happy with it. And I think that's because we just went through so many rounds of reviews, like just like way too many. My editor, like I think I drove him absolutely crazy. Um, and so just because because originally I come from a copywriting background, so I had everything in a paper edit. Um, and then from there, got it into video and then we just iterated. So I've and then Nichole and I were very strategically able to fill in story beats and talk about like essentially, I mean, not that we scripted it out, but like because we were working so well together, like we really knew exactly what we wanted her to say and what we wanted, like what theme we wanted to portray and all of that. So, so I did like after a million edit reviews, I really felt like it was done.
And then you started submitting into festivals like ourselves and like ours, and it's I can see that on your websites playing at different festivals. So I'm assuming you're hoping to get like a distribution deal, kind of like is that the ultimate goal, like to get it out there, get it on a streaming service?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the distribution world is nuts and constantly evolving. And this is really my first experience in this world. So, of course, the dream is to get it on a credible, popular platform. But also, it seems like these days, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, self-distribution is a path. So we've definitely pursued that since the release of the film. Um, and then I've had some conversations with sales agents and what have you, and just kind of learning more about that. But I'd like to push the self distribution as far as like really tapping into our target audiences, which is the mindfulness community, the canyoneering community, search and rescue. I'd like to continue pushing that, and then hoping that the film along with film festivals gets enough traction to where we naturally can get a deal kind of at the end of our self-distribution run.
And we send the have like our festival gives you an audience feedback video. What did you think about what our audience had to say about your film?
That was such a cool experience. I really enjoyed working with your festival, because at that time I really had only gotten feedback from friends and with the finished film, like our friends and family screening. So that was the first time that I got unbiased feedback from strangers, and so I had no idea what it was going to be like, what people were going to say. So that was a really exciting experience.
And then, so right now you still work in advertising. You go to your website, Baylee Center.com. You've worked for like some pretty established companies, like you're based in Seattle, so Microsoft, and you worked for Alexa. You worked for this. You did some jobs for the Seattle Seahawks as well, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, I actually had an internship with the Seahawks right out of college. So that was a really cool experience.
That's pretty cool. Like, but was it during their Super Bowl kind of team era, or?
It was, let's see, it was 2015 and they went to the Super Bowl, what, 2014, 2013? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think yeah, it could be yeah, in that around that time. I think it was yeah, 13. Yeah, you're right. It was 13, 14. Yeah.
But it was the Legion of Boom era. So we
Yeah.
had Sherman and Earl Thomas and Marshawn Lynch and Russell, of course. And yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, because that's when they had the ultimate Super Bowl victory, and then the ultimate the worst thing that ever can happen to a franchise in
Oh,
the ending, right? So
yeah,
we don't have
painful.
to get into that. But I was heartbroken, so I can't imagine being from Seattle, how that you felt back then. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
We won't get into it. No,
So basically, so you seem like you have a pretty great job and you're doing well, but do you think you're going to make another documentary feature? Do you got the bug? Do you have any ideas that you want to do in the future?
oh my gosh. Yes, it's so funny because part of me is like, never again. And then
Yeah.
another part of me is like already working on multiple other ideas. So I am like I've been saying, I learned so much from this process, um, that I am interested in doing another project and really focusing on how to make things more efficient and streamlined and successful. Um, I hate to say it, this is gonna sound like such a sellout, but it's so hard to make a living as a documentary filmmaker, which of course, that would be the dream. And as I'm learning more and more about distribution, I think I would, if I were to do another feature documentary, I would need to make sure that there was an audience and there was potential for money
Yeah.
behind it. Because 7 years and it's all self-funded. Nichole and I self-funded the majority of the film. And it's obviously it's just not sustainable. So but there's great stories out there with audiences, but that would be one of my focuses. And then I love working on short, so I have a couple short documentaries in the works that are just for
Well, in a lot
fun.
of ways, this is your proof of concept that you could make a documentary feature. So I think what you're referring to is that you like say Netflix is like you pitch a story to Netflix for I'm just using a hypothetical, and then like, okay, yeah, go out and make that film and here's some money, we'll see you in 6 months kind of a thing.
Well,
I
that
think
would be awesome.
no, but you've proven that you can make a documentary in with this film, and you can see like I without even knowing that you worked in advertising until after I saw your film, but you saw the meticulous nature in your film, and advertising is all about being meticulous because it's like it's 30, you generally say it's a 30-second commercial, it's like every second, every frame counts, and the client wants all these different elements, and it looks beautiful, and you could see that you worked it in, and you've done some animation as well, and some of your work that you've done with animation, so you could see like it's not just a documentary feature that you made, like I see a ton of them. You can see the artistry within what you did. Like I said, I talked about all the elements that you did, right? Stock footage, and then you got the animation, the interview style, then you got the nature, and you got the reenactments going on, and you put it all into one film, which is like you kind of broke some rules there, but you achieved your goal.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I think having an advertising background also was helpful, just knowing how much things cost. You actually reminded me of something because animation is obviously expensive. And so one little creative trick that we did to keep those costs down is integrating stock footage into the animation. So for example, we have those map animations,
Mm,
and it's a map and you see the car going across the state. And so as the background in Seattle, the water, it's actually real stock footage water. And so
mm.
that's just like one huge element within the scene that then we don't have to animate. And so in all the stock scenes, we used a lot of the environmental textures uh, are stock footage.
Yeah. So yeah, so like you like this, like I said, like I think that I understand what you're trying to say. It's like this is you don't what read between the lines. You don't want to make another 7 year feature documentary anymore. You've done that, right? Self-funded, self 7 year
Unless
documentaries.
someone wants to pay me for 7 years,
That's what I'm
I'm
saying. So the yeah, like not the self-funded has to be taken away from the aspect, right? So, but
yeah.
listen, documentary features you can see on these streaming services, like they're popular. People are watching them, right? So, but it's in generally it's good, cheap, and fast theory, right? Like if you're good, if you have money, then it doesn't take as long to make the film, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to give us money.
Well, you proved it. So like it's like now you're on the last stage, and it's a different roller coaster, and basically so well whatever
Yeah.
you can do to help. But it's a great film, and really
Thank you.
nice, nicely directed film. So like you got some game.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That really means a lot.
So let's talk again. Not in 7 years, but perhaps we'll talk again when you make your next film. And like I said, yeah, there's always the shorts, like the shorter subjects, which have an audience as well. So hopefully we'll touch base again in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much.